Some people notice everything about themselves. Not just what they say, but how they said it. The tone, the timing, the reaction on the other person's face. They replay conversations later in their head, wondering if they sounded awkward, rude, too quiet, too much. If you've ever walked away from a normal interaction and immediately started analyzing it like a scene in a movie, you might already know what this feels like. It's not just thinking, it's watching yourself think. And people who are too self-aware live in that space almost constantly. From the outside, they often look calm, thoughtful, maybe even emotionally intelligent. But internally, their mind is rarely quiet. Self-awareness is usually seen as a positive trait. It's associated with emotional intelligence, maturity, reflection. And to a certain point, that's true. Self-aware people notice their behavior. They notice patterns. They notice how their actions affect others. But sometimes that awareness doesn't stop at understanding. It turns into constant observation, almost like there's a second version of themselves standing slightly behind them, watching everything they do. While they're speaking in a conversation, another part of their mind is analyzing the conversation. While they're laughing, another part of them is wondering if the laugh sounded fake. While they're listening, they're also monitoring how long they've been quiet and whether it looks strange. So instead of simply experiencing moments, they're studying themselves inside the moment. And over time, that changes how a person moves through the world. You'll often see it in small behaviors. Typing a message, then rewriting it 3 times. Reading a text again before sending it, just to make sure the tone can't be misunderstood. Thinking about a comment they made hours ago, wondering if it came across wrong. Not because they're insecure in the obvious sense, but because their mind automatically scans for how their actions might be interpreted. It's a kind of psychological radar. They're constantly aware of the invisible social signals happening around them. Tone shifts, facial expressions, pauses in conversation, and their brain quietly collects all of it. Most people move through interactions without noticing half of these details, but someone who is highly self-aware rarely misses them. The problem is, noticing everything also means feeling responsible for everything. Every silence, every awkward moment, every shift in energy, even when it had nothing to do with them. Over time, this awareness can slowly turn into self-monitoring. Before they say something, their mind runs it through a filter. Will this sound strange? Will this change how they see me? Should I say it differently? And sometimes that filter works so quickly they don't even realize it's happening. They just become someone who pauses more, who speaks carefully, who thinks before reacting, which can look like composure, but often it's actually calculation. Not manipulation, just constant adjustment. And here's where it gets interesting. The real reason people become too self-aware usually isn't intelligence. It's not overthinking either. It's adaptation. At some point in their life, paying close attention to themselves became emotionally useful. Maybe they grew up around unpredictable reactions. Maybe small mistakes were noticed quickly. Maybe certain emotions were safer to hide than express. So their brain learned something very early. Watch yourself closely. Make sure you don't become the problem. Notice how people respond. Adjust accordingly. And that skill, once it develops, doesn't turn off easily. Even in environments where it's no longer necessary. The brain still believes that careful awareness keeps things stable. That's why many deeply self-aware people are also very considerate. They notice when someone feels left out. They notice when a conversation shifts. They notice the moment someone becomes uncomfortable, because they've spent years observing subtle emotional changes. But the part people don't see is that the same awareness is constantly turned inward. They're not only observing others, they're observing themselves through the imagined eyes of others. And that can create a strange internal distance. Instead of simply being themselves in a moment, they're also watching themselves be themselves. This can make even normal situations feel mentally heavy. A simple conversation becomes a small analysis. A disagreement becomes a reflection. A quiet moment becomes something to interpret. Nothing is just happening. Everything is being processed. And sometimes that level of awareness can make people feel strangely disconnected from their own spontaneity. They might wish they could just speak without thinking so much, react without reviewing every possible interpretation, be present without the internal commentary. But when your mind has spent years analyzing behavior, silence inside your head can feel unfamiliar. And the interesting part is, most people around them would never guess, because externally, they often seem thoughtful, calm, emotionally aware. They ask good questions, they notice details, they rarely say things they regret. But internally, their mind is rarely fully at rest. It's observing, tracking, reflecting, and adjusting. So when someone says a person is too self-aware, it doesn't mean they simply understand themselves well. It often means they've spent so much time studying their own behavior that they sometimes forget what it feels like to simply exist without observation, to move without analyzing the movement, to speak without measuring the words, to experience a moment without mentally stepping outside of it. And once you recognize this pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. In the pauses, in the careful phrasing, in the way certain people seem quietly aware of everything happening in a room. It was never random, it was a pattern. And once you see it, you really can't unsee it. If this explained something you've quietly noticed about yourself or others, there's always more beneath the surface. Because understanding human behavior starts with one simple realization. Sometimes the mind that observes the most is also the one that rarely gets to rest.